Maybe I should explain myself, my role here first, because I'm just a facilitator for this discussion. The main question I wish to be questions are from participants, so that if you raise the questions, then we will discuss it. And if you do not help me to ask some questions, then I will be the one to answer. So it would be great if you can help with it. Maybe I can start first. Yes, and I hear a lot about the vision about the sustainability and urbanization, as you mentioned, Jake, is one of the main process that's happening in China. And our case is about a project in China. And what the participants can deliver will be applied to other places. So what do you see urbanization as an opportunity to be in terms of sustainability? Do you have any kind of view?
Well, actually, for anything, you need to have a champion who try to push the case. So I think that organizations, if you can get your top management sharing the ideas of sustainability or trying to have a vision, Mr. Bookhart has said, if they have visions, then you're able to push or able to move the organization in that direction. And then it will be indispensable for us to adopt any of these measures. So organization, yes, is really something that motivate or to foster drive the implementations of these concepts.
I would just go back to last year's winter. I mean, the idea of the green lung, the breathing lung, green lung, I think is really brilliant. It's a great idea. And it's a great idea for a number of reasons, because it's one of those things that's so unexpected that I think that other people will start to pay attention. And I think that that's really great, because the innovation is a big piece of this. So if you have, if you have a design that includes solar panels and wind turbines and things like that, well, that's not new, it's not innovative. It might be green, and it might be helpful, but something like a green lung is something that nobody's heard of before. That might turn some heads, and it could create a whole new discussion about what does it mean to bring in ventilated air. We just think that you just turn on a fan and it pulls it in, but why don't you pull it in through the reconstruction? Or let the plants create that service for you and take the air before you get hits the filters. So I think it's something that other people might kind of shake their head, and they might like it or they may not like it, but it'll be something to get them talking. That would be a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I just would add a little bit what you said earlier in your talk is urbanization, because it covers so many different areas of living environments, of infrastructure, of making available buildings and facilities and environments in total, is very much a systems. It requires a systems approach, and I think that's what sustainability is about. It's an all-inclusive, as much as possible, systems approach to building something that lasts and that provides benefits and at the same time does not damage. So I like what you said. If we have waste, we already failed. And so I believe that the amounts of urbanization that we will still see, the amounts of buildings being built, there is plenty of opportunity and also a requirement for ideas and innovations that take away what we consider today typically a living area for many big cities.
I mean, to me, urbanization, the JQ mentioned about the Baolai, the situation in India, right? And about they use the open stove. And that is part of the culture that is happening in India. It is something that fixed, that you cannot change it in a simple way. So you introduce it by the board, Baolai, to improve the situation. But to me, urbanization that's happening in China may have another benefit towards this kind of things, because they do not have access to the electricity. Through the urbanization, the people can actually, they can abandon the open stove. Instead, they can move into an apartment, to a flat, that they can use the electricity. And that is part of the things that I can see that it is improving through urbanization.
Okay, actually I have 2 questions. The first one is, if sustainability is easy to achieve or even possible to achieve in Hong Kong in such a heavy and economy-oriented city? And the second question is, if yes, then are there any good examples for Hong Kong to follow? Say another very economy-intense city that can achieve sustainability successfully. Thank you.
It's a great question. And I think you should answer that. But so I think here is an example of to your answer, right? You actually, your project and that what you're working on is a yes, at least partially for the island of Lama. Because, so 2/3 of the global middle class is going to be in Asia Pacific. So by 2030. So you will see more and more requirement as people progress and become happier and wealthier. You will see a requirement for better living environments as well. So I think there will be an imperative towards sustainability, whether we call it sustainability or whatever that might be. So I certainly see that this is going to happen. The opportunities are here to actually build an innovative competitive edge, I believe, in Asia. Because it requires, it's a very different environment than you already have in Europe and in other countries. So what it does require is a play of private sector and public sector. You require policymakers making the right decision and private sector spearheading it. And if that connects well, then I believe you have the opportunity to do so. In comparison to other cities in Asia, I think there could be a lot more done here. So at least from what I see, and while I live here, I'm traveling a lot, so I see other cities probably more than Hong Kong. But in any case, I believe there is more opportunity here. If anything, Hong Kong has the opportunity because it's so condensed, and the density itself already is asking for that. We hear more and more about landfills and people protesting against landfills being expanded. And I think there will be more and more also a push from the population requiring more activities there.
Okay. Yes, as expected. As expressed, my answer is a resounding yes. Why not? And then when people ask, is there any precedence? Why do we need precedence? Why can't we be the precedence? Why can't we set an example for others to follow? A lot of people asking, have anybody done something like that? Like what you're proposing? No. People do bits and pieces, but not in a comprehensive manner, as far as I know. Like us, but why can't we be the leader? Why can't we set the examples? That is my very short answer to you. Basically, I don't believe there is a necessarily a conflict. Previously, we just take the easy way out because we are very wealthy, we have abundance of resources, we don't have to worry about it. And so that we lead to the existing situations and lead to a different lifestyle like we are. But now we are seeing the problems, and then we need to solve the problems. And that problem is really prompting you solutions. And that I think not only us, but all over Hong Kong, over the world, people are trying to find the solutions. And I'm sure one day the solution will be found. But we have to abandon the old way of doing, because old way of doing is pertaining to the particular situation which is fast changing, is no longer a workable environment. So we have to find new solutions to the new problems, and then I'm sure that development and urbanization or conservation can exist. Why not? It's really a matter how we try to draw. The trend now is to draw the lessons from nature, how nature recycles itself, how we try to minimize use, and then if we adopt this principle, and I think more and more people are now into this sort of philosophy, into different lifestyle. If we adopt the lifestyle, I think things can change. But we have to abandon what we used to do, to change our ways of living, change our ways of working, or even doing new developments.
Well, I think that I came here in August. I've been to Hong Kong a number of times, but I moved here for good in August, so I've only been here for about seven months. But when I first got here, my assistant told me, she said, you know, people in Hong Kong are very impatient. We don't like to wait, and we're always in a hurry. And so I thought, that's actually a very good thing for sustainability, because when Hong Kong decides that Hong Kong is going to be the most sustainable city in the world, I think you're going to do it in no time at all. And I think that's one of the real advantages of being here in Hong Kong, is that this place is so efficient and it's so driven that when we hit the tipping point that Hong Kong people and the Hong Kong government and all of the policies are aligned, I think that there's going to be nothing stopping the city from becoming a sustainable showcase of the world, really. But let me just maybe recast your question. So the question was, can we afford it? You know, is it financially feasible? And I guess what I would challenge you to think of is, what do you mean by financially or economically? Because there's a lot of ways to think about costs. And what I would say is that when you think about cost, you really need to be thinking about value. So when we always look at the bottom line, how much something costs, then we're missing out on all of the value that also comes with it. So let me give you an example. If you have a building and you spend a little bit more money, okay, so increase your cost, but you spend that money to make the air more fresh and have more windows so that natural light comes in, which we know from studies makes people happier. And if you know that by doing those things that you make people want to stay in your company longer, because now they're happier, and it also makes them sick less, so it means you have less sick days, then wouldn't you say that that investment is actually economically feasible? Even though if you look at it, you would say, oh, we shouldn't do that because it will cost more. But if you look at the whole life cycle, you see, actually, we're looking at the cost from a different point of view. We want to look at the value, the overall value. And if there's an additional value that says, I work in that building and I love that building because it's got natural light, it's clean, and then I tell my friends, now they want to get a job there too. Now I've got good PR, so that's valuable as well. So you add all of those things up and you realize that costs are just a very tiny portion of what might make something more of a sustainable.
You just mentioned about if you want to try out the sustainability in Hong Kong, it's going to be fast, but I do have some holdback. I mean, say for example, if you read the news, CLP is trying the wind farm, I think it's CLP, in Hong Kong, and of course it is good to do so, but in a lot of people in Hong Kong, their thinking is like, if you buy the electricity produced from like wind, it's going to be expensive. But if you are going to increase the electricity bill in Hong Kong, there sure will be a lot of opposition from the people. Like a lot of us, like when you perceive, you like even a piece of beef. How do you see the price of the beef? Do you know that a piece of beef costs hundreds of liters of water to do it? These kind of cost waters, more than 100,000, 2,000, more. And actually many people do not see this kind of costs, and they price it for each degree of electricity. I see like $1 Is it fair? I mean, this involves a lot of education, awareness to change the people's mind towards what is really a cost to a product. So I think it's going to take a lot of time. But I think Hong Kong do have one advantage is that it has the money, and being focused on economy means people have more money to invest. And this kind of change in technology is done because of money. And I see this is maybe the opportunity behind it.
Thank you very much for all the speakers. I really appreciate. Okay, this whole event is very well organized, and the objective of this competition is very good. The teams need to work with the ideas that work against the idea that sustainability and profitabilities they don't necessarily agree with each other. So the objective of this competition is really to have the teams to think about how can we achieve sustainabilities and profitabilities together. Now, but in the conventional model, the other so-called, opposite elements is the developers and the user. They may not agree with each other. They have different objectives. So my question to the speakers would be, for the teams participating in this competition, how should the project or how should the design also need to think about the user? So in a sense, how should the plan, how should the project also accommodate the user need, so that the developers and the user can actually work together to figure out this low carbon community plan? How should the user's need be incorporated? In innovation, we have a lot of saying talking about user-led innovation. So it's not only from the developer point of view, it's not only from the manufacturer's point of view, you also need to have a say from the user or from the stakeholders. So any advice to the teams, how should the users' needs be incorporated?
First of all, I think every developer will try to do something that the user wants. Otherwise, they won't buy. And I don't think cost is really a barrier as such. It's really if you desire a Benz or if you like a Toyota, because you want quality of the Benz, so you're willing to pay a little bit more for it. So it's really to create an expectation for the user requirements that will be willing to do it. A lot of people equate, just like the speaker question before, is that sustainability and the cost, it doesn't have to be contradictory. It's really, if we create something that the user like, we create a lifestyle that the user want to live in, they are willing to pay a little bit more for it. So cost, as far as this is my personal concern, is cost is not a lot of problems. Cost, it won't cost a lot. Sometimes actually, using a sustainable design can reduce cost if you take into account the life cycle costs, or even sometimes the construction costs. Take for example the proposed development in Lama. If you do the sewage treatment, if you do a two-stage treatment and then you pump the effluents to the Lama channel, etc., it actually costs much more than to do a three-stage treatment and keep everything between our sites. So it's really how you make use of the best character of the site, and sometimes it is influenced by the availability of infrastructure within your site. That doing sustainability, if you say the most sustainable development usually happen on the remote islands or remote locations where you don't have the import of the external resources. So we have to take just like the Canadian examples, which is a Bookhart, just cite, because you need to save everything. So the way we're wasting a lot of resources until now in the recent centuries, because there's too much resources, seems to be too cheap. But when these are becoming scarce and when we're worried about the environment, then we need to pay that extra for preserving the resources, for changing the lifestyle. The difficulty I think in Hong Kong is that people don't believe in sustainability initiatives by developers because they think it's just a gimmick. Then you try to to meet, try to satisfy the different people who are concerned about this. But I don't think if you look forward, that trend is that people, all the stakeholders, are mindful about the future, about the sustainability. They really want to be able to take part in a living building that is sustainable. So when you turn it into an asset, deal with sustainability is no longer solving a problem, but rather than creating a lifestyle that people want, then it's a different story. You don't treat it as your liabilities. That's what very important thing is when we reach the stage that sustainable design or conservation no longer a liability, and rather than then become a lifestyle, then everything will change. At the moment, the difficulties of people like us trying to do something is that people don't believe it. Say this is greenwash. Once you get approval, you won't implement it. But why? Why don't we implement it? Because in 10 years' time, these people want them out, at least not all, at least many people like to live in this environment. They like to be able to live in a house that's low carbon footprint. They like to be able to walk down the hill and then do some organic farming. They like to enjoy the organic food which is grown from the farming, just several yards away. So I think we are changing. I think the attitude is changing, and I hope some people will also accept the ideas that this is a lifestyle that we want to live in. The developers' mentality is also changing, but the difficulty is to get people to work together. Very often we try to work together with people. Work together till people see what they want, what the suggestions. But because of this lack of confidence, people are really not willing to participate, not willing to share that because they don't believe that you are going to implement this. That's why I say, why don't we give it a try? Why don't we give it a try? How do you know? But I can say that we are doing this not because we want to satisfy the different groups concerned, because we want to create or promote a different lifestyles. And I think that's the trend. We just see the trend ahead of other people as well because we need to be innovative.
I just had that I remember reading that there was a famous quote from Henry Ford, kind of in the context of marketing. And he said, when I began this business, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said, I want a faster horse. So innovation is inherently about coming up with something new that people haven't thought of before. And I know in my experience, I mean, I'm not a very smart guy, so every time anything new came up, I always said, boy, that's dumb. When email was invented, I thought, why would I have email? I could just pick up the phone and call somebody, And when the internet came up, I thought, wow, what a waste. And smartphones, why would you want to have a smartphone? I've got a computer. And every step of the way, it takes me a little while, but I finally realized, oh, that was pretty smart after all. And I think that just to be innovative, it means that we need to put some things out there that people can see and they can kick and they can touch, and then they say, oh, you know what, I never thought about that before. That is interesting. And then that becomes part of the user experience. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I think that the innovation is all about providing things that people might want. And I think that from a sustainability point of view, that makes sense. So to follow up on that, the one note of caution that I would add is that I think that the biggest problem with innovation these days is quite often when things get too complicated. So I think the reason why Steve Jobs was so successful at Apple was that he really simplified. That was their mantra, make everything simple. You take out your smartphone, it doesn't even have an on switch. Just eliminate everything that doesn't make sense. And I think that's a key. So, for example, we had a building years ago and it had this really sophisticated lighting system. It was programs that would turn the lights on, turn the lights off, and occupancy sensors and timers and all kinds of things. But it was so complicated, no one knew how to use it. And about a year later, when I showed up, I said, can somebody show me how this thing works? Nobody knew how it worked. And in fact, we called a representative to come in and explain it to us, and he got on the computer and he said, oh, the entire software has been deleted. And it had been gone for a year and nobody even knew about it. So you can make things too complicated, too sophisticated, so focus on simplicity.
some great leeway into something very similar that I wanted to say is, so Steve Jobs said, the user does not know best. When the iPod came out, there were MP3 players on the market who had far more functionalities than the iPod, including radio and all sorts of other things. They're far cheaper than the iPod 2, and yet nobody talks about MP3 players today, right? So what he meant by saying that was, the user doesn't know, because we are in the midst of, as a user, we are in the midst of doing things. We don't see the forest for the trees. So as a designer, you should know, you should find out, and I would take a page out of companies like IDEO and Frog Design. They literally immerse themselves as design companies into the living environment of their target market. So if they make mobile phones for lower income people in India, they live with lower income people for a week to take down how do they live. And so for this particular project, I would say, I mean, we all live in buildings, so you already are a user of it. All you need to do is go inside your own household and identify every single user and try to take down what are they doing, what do they want to do, what is the daily habits. And that gives you maybe a hint towards how you want to approach this particular project. Design in general, I think, is like an orchestration of different requirements and players. So you have the developers, which is like the violin, they give the melody, and you have the kettle drum in the back, that's the policy makers. But the user itself plays different types of roles as well. So there are many different peoples, and so you want to make sure that you cover all of them and balance it out, and eventually, if you're successful, you have a beautiful symphony.
I agree. And just a little hint, in your case, there is something that addresses the needs, that may imply the needs of the users. I mean, like their income, their age, something that, of course, the users may not know what they want, but for certain people of the age, they may have something that they prefer, that maybe you go to that direction, it may help you a bit.
Mainland Chinese people, because as what research you have just explained about the situation, and I think there is some different cultural difference between Hong Kong Chinese and mainland Chinese. So how about mainland people? Is there any difficulty to introduce the concept of sustainability to them? Thank you.
Let me just very quickly just ask a couple of questions. Do you think that mainland Chinese people like pollution and bad air quality, or do you think that they like the piles of trash?
I think they're not much concerned about pollution for them.
If that's the case, then that may be very difficult. But I believe that people are similar. Deep down, we're all very similar. Now, they may be focusing on things that help them stay alive and making money and things like that, but I don't think that anybody appreciates bad air quality, polluted rivers. I think they all recognize that there are parts of China where rivers are receding. The Yangtze River doesn't even make it to the ocean for months at a time now because there's so much water has been pulled out of it. So there's a lot of things that I think the mainland Chinese people recognize. Now, they may not be able to do anything about it, but I don't think that it's hard to suggest that we could start engaging in positive ways to say, if you're not satisfied with your air quality and your water pollution, and your living conditions, and whether or not you feel like you're sick more often than people in other parts of the world, then that's the foundation that we can build on. So what do we have to do to start making that right? And I think that almost everybody will think that. And the second thing is that everybody in mainland China who has children is maybe willing to sacrifice for themselves, but they always want the best for their children. And that's really the focus of sustainability. Is what are we doing? What can I do today? I don't mind if I have to work hard and I sacrifice and maybe I'll breathe this dirty air, but I really want my children to have a better life. And I think that's the conversation that we have in mainland China, and I think everybody can do
There was one case where a whole village demonstrated against the extension of a polluting factory, and they succeeded in stopping that extension. So I would say the same thing. I think we want to see blue skies, right? I mean, if you look back into all the Chinese paintings, the skies are blue, not yellow. And I think people do recognize that. And I'm pretty sure they may be willing to do now a generational sacrifice, but I'm pretty sure they want to have that better as well.
I think I totally agree with the two speakers. But I think that there are a lot of million Chinese students in this university, or my friends, just ask them. And I don't believe anybody a lot care about the sustainability issues, but we also have a world that beggar have no choice. So you struggle for a living, then the important thing is to get your mouth feed before you look at the environment. So that had to happen. In Europe, America, 19th century, just look at last miserable. You look at how awful you are. The situation is bad. That time it's only you look at the Western European, they're in such a state because the past, the initial stages of urbanization, industrializations, and then it's really China is taking up the job. And now I can see that China is also moving some of the polluting industry elsewhere. So elsewhere are some other people's problems. So I'm sure that is. I don't believe anybody in this world want to live in a very polluted environment. But there are some practical situation which they have to grapple with. They have to enjoy it until they're in a position to change it. You look at China, they say very ambitious programs, for pollution control, etc., etc. But of course, the system itself still they cannot enforce a lot of things they want to enforce, and something that I hope will gradually improve. Just like Hong Kong 20 years ago, nobody cared about pollution, nobody cared about anything. But now we are reaching that stage. Of course, China actually they are even more educated about sustainability than we were 20 years ago. Just that you have to wait for the society development to catch up. I'm sure it will be accelerated much faster than we have been.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the interesting discussion.